They attacked a human colony. Earth's retaliation shocked the galaxy. The hull of the Imperial flagship split under a sudden kinetic impact. 140 black warships formed a seamless wall across the open stars, cutting off every escape vector. They had not appeared on any tactical display until the trap closed completely. They held the perimeter with the absolute certainty of a closing iron fist. No broadcast came from the human fleet. There were no terms offered to the invaders. The main railgun arrays on the lead human vessels gathered their primary electrical charge in the deep cold of space. Inside the hidden observation post, the air tasted of metallic ion filtration and stale dust. The high-yield military apparatus was fully active, and the entire Imperial fleet was trapped inside its firing lines. The initial colony strike had promised an easy conquest, but the Empire had misread the long silence of their prey. The original transmission did not end with a request for mercy. It ended with a countdown that was now reaching its final seconds. Earlier that day, Fleet Commander Julian Hark stood on the reinforced deck and watched the border colony burn. The main viewscreen showed the distant green sphere fracturing under continuous orbital plasma fire from the Imperial vanguard. It looked tiny from the station, a quiet spark dying in the dark. Hark did not look away from the glass. His left hand developed a sharp, rapid tremor, the fingers twitching rhythmically against his dark uniform seam. He reached down with his thick right hand and clamped it over the iron band around his left wrist, forcing the shaking muscle into hard stillness. He focused his eyes on the tactical data streaming across the secondary monitors. The incoming numbers confirmed the total destruction of every defense grid on the surface below. The Imperial leader is broadcasting on all open-wide frequencies, comms lead Jake said. She did not look up from her low console, her fingers striking keys with heavy precision to isolate the audio signal. He is using the unencrypted Imperial channel to reach our outer stations. The deep voice filled the command deck, heavy with casual amusement. To the remnant authorities of the human territories, your complete silence is noted. Your total lack of a defensive line is highly sensible. We took your agricultural centers within 3 hours of our arrival. Your massive grain silos make excellent target practice for our youngest gunners. Do not attempt to assemble a defense force. We will harvest the remaining sectors by tomorrow morning. Hark reached into his uniform pocket and pulled out a small, unpolished shard of obsidian. It was rough, heavy, and jagged at the edges. He turned it over once in his bare palm, letting the sharp stone corners dig deep into his skin to anchor his focus. Tactical Officer Vane, Hark said, his voice entirely flat and clear. Log the casualty metrics from the border colony mainframe into our primary database. The population data is dropping into the system now, Vane replied. He pulled a heavy manual lever, routing the raw data streams away from the public networks. 32 million civilian signatures have vanished in the first few passes. The verification threshold for our response is officially complete. Hark nodded once, his face rigid. He walked over to a small metal shelf near the primary terminal where a miniature bonsai tree sat, its tiny leaves vivid green against the gray industrial bulkheads. He took a pair of steel shears and made a sharp, dry click, trimming a single stray branch from the base. The threshold is met, Hark said, setting the shears down on the console. Enter the raw metrics into the charter mainframe. We will wait for their main force to reach the turn before we unlock the grid. The Imperial fleet moved through the void like a school of predatory fish, their bright golden-hulled cruisers sleek and arrogant as they crossed into the perimeter. They expected nothing but easy salvage and abandoned equipment. The entire sector was supposed to be a regional shipping hub filled with bloated, slow-moving ore haulers and standard industrial barges. On the main tactical grid, the Imperial capital ships advanced in a tight, aggressive wedge, their weapons tracking empty space. They had encountered no resistance since clearing the atmosphere of the border colony. The Golden Vanguard reached the exact center of the shipping lane. The massive human cargo vessels sat motionless in the dark ahead of them, their transponders broadcasting standard industrial distress codes. To the Imperial scanners, the ships looked like hollow steel boxes, identical to the thousands of transport units humanity had used for commerce. Exarch Zorvane stood on the bridge of his magnificent flagship, watching the distant cargo vessels grow larger on his visual monitors. He smiled at the crude, boxy shapes of the human transports, noting the lack of armor or heavy weapon mounts on their hulls. They left their wealth behind, he muttered to his primary crew. They fled like insects before the fire. Suddenly, the sensor panels across the Imperial flagship began to flash a violent, deep crimson. The automated systems did not register standard cargo holds anymore. The internal mass signatures of the targets were shifting rapidly, density readings spiking beyond measurable limits. The metal walls of the cargo haulers were splitting open from within, thrown outward by heavy explosive charges. They have passed the outer marker, Jakes reported from the human station. She cleared a flashing yellow parameter on her screen, turning the display dark. The flagship is leading their vanguard. They are not scanning for military signatures because they still believe we are running with raw rocks. They see the haulers, Vane added, his hand resting directly on the primary weapons lock. They think we are cowards. Hold the line until their entire formation hits the center coordinates, Hark said. His left hand remained perfectly steady now, clamped tight under the weight of his iron grip. The Imperial wedge reached the exact center of the killing zone. The golden ships were perfectly aligned, their flanks exposed to the surrounding asteroid fields where the cloaked human vessels waited in total silence. Coordinates reached, Vane said, lifting the plastic guard from his console. Activate the charter, Hark commanded. Blow the plates. A low, deep subaudible thrum vibrated through the steel floorboards of the observation deck as the command signal left the station. Across the dark sector, explosive tracking bolts popped off the dummy scaffolding of the massive ore haulers. The thick, rusted outer plating of the industrial vessels sheared away in great, tumbling chunks, driven outward by internal gas charges. Beneath the hollow cargo hulls lay the sleek, midnight black prows of hidden warships. They were not light cruisers or defensive platforms. They were massive spinal-mount kinetic warships built for a single purpose. At the same instant, the remaining vessels detached from their cloaked anchors in the shadows of the surrounding asteroids, completing the circle. The Imperial navigation grid flipped from empty space to an absolute wall of military hardware within a single second. Zorvane's fleet was boxed in from every single vector, their shields facing the wrong direction. The Imperial bridge erupted into total chaos as the crew tried to process the transformation. The targets are capital ships, the sensor officer shouted, his voice cracking with sudden terror. They are not cargo vessels. They are heavy dreadnoughts, 140 of them. Zorvane stared at his main display, his face draining of all color as the black hulls surrounded his fleet. The arrogant smile was entirely gone, replaced by a cold, paralyzing realization of his mistake. The humans had not fled. They had built a graveyard and waited for him to walk inside it. Turn the fleet around, he roared, his hands gripping the command rail until his knuckles turned white. Get us out of this sector immediately. The Imperial flagship is trying to cycle its primary shields, Jake said, her voice fast but level. They are attempting a mass jump out of the system. Cut the room, Hark said, his eyes fixed on the golden flagship. Vane struck his console with the heel of his hand, firing localized pulse array now. Blinding flash of blue energy erupted from the hidden human satellite network, washing over the Imperial fleet. The localized communication array of the invaders shattered under the electronic assault. The golden cruisers flickered, their bright external running lights dying as the local network collapsed entirely into static. Zorvane was completely cut off from the Empire's home world, unable to send a single distress call. The flagship core is still active, Vane reported, his fingers flying across the targeting matrix. They are bringing their main plasma lances online to fire on our left flank. Target their primary reactor housing, Hark said. Precision kinetic strike, clear the lanes. The dreadnought arrays lined up their firing sequences with mechanical precision. The silence inside the human command deck was absolute, broken only by the steady hum of the heavy rail casings gathering their final electrical charge. The crew moved with the cold efficiency of executioners, ignoring the panicked movements of the trapped enemy cruisers. They fired once, they fired twice, they stopped. 3 massive tungsten slugs, moving at a fraction of the speed of light, tore through the dark void toward the Imperial flagship. There were no explosive payloads inside the projectiles, and no bright flashes of plasma followed their release. There was only the brutal, physical impact of dense metal hitting energy shields that were not fully formed. The initial slug sheared away the upper communications tower of the flagship, scattering golden debris across the stars. The following projectile punched straight through the secondary armor belt, crushing the deck beneath it. The final round went directly through the flagship's central reactor core, exiting the opposite side of the vessel in a spray of molten metal and shattered internal bulkheads. The golden flagship went entirely dark. Its primary power died instantly, leaving the massive vessel drifting helplessly in the thermal silence of deep space. The surrounding cruisers broke their tight formation, drifting like autumn leaves in a sudden gale, their internal electronic systems completely paralyzed by the localized kinetic shockwaves of the strike. The battle was over before the invaders could fire a single shot. Hark walked away from the view screen and approached the primary terminal. His left hand did not shake as he pulled the heavy iron band from his wrist and set it down on the cold metal desk. The tremor was completely gone, replaced by the rigid stillness of a finished task. He took the rough obsidian shard from his uniform pocket, holding it up to the light of the monitors. He opened the glass maintenance casing of the main reactor terminal on the bridge and dropped the black stone directly onto the active power casing. The stone did not melt. It sat there silently, a permanent dark marker of a closed ledger. "Bring up the broadbeam channel to the Imperial High Council," Hark said, turning his back to the window. "Send the data packet containing the casualty logs and the footage of their flagship." "Channel open, sir," Jake said, locking the signal into the planetary networks. "They are receiving our transmission on the Homeworld Prime network right now." Hark did not look at the recording camera when he spoke. He kept his eyes on the flat line on his tactical screen showing the dead status of the enemy fleet. "This is Fleet Commander Julian Hark," he said into the communication pickup. His voice was entirely devoid of anger, carrying only the weight of cold, unyielding fact. "Your vanguard entered our space without provocation. They found our grain silos and targeted our people. We have logged the metrics of your strike. The perimeter is closed forever. Do not send another fleet to this sector. We are no longer farming." He reached out with his steady right hand and struck the master kill switch himself, terminating the connection to the Imperial capital. The main console screen went entirely black, showing a flat, silent line across the center of the glass. Inside the room, the only sound left was the quiet, rhythmic ticking of the automated cooling fans. The viewscreen outside showed the silent, dark hulls of the human fleet guarding the graveyard of the Empire.